Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Josh. I'm a destination wedding and elopement photographer and videographer based out of West Michigan. And today I want to chat with you about my experience shooting a multi-day elopement in Scotland using the Canon RF 28-70 f2.0 lens. So first things first, I do not own this lens personally. This is a lens that I rented from lensrentals.com. Not a sponsored bit at all, but they are phenomenal for renting gear. And if you haven't rented gear before, I strongly encourage you to do so. It's a great way to kind of test things out, see what fits into your workflow, into your kit, and lensrentals.com is a fantastic place to do that. So I am currently on an all EF lens kit. I haven't transitioned my lenses over to the RF series because number one, they cost a ton of money, and two, Canon hasn't come out with a 35mm f1.4 or 1.2 like L series RF lens yet. And so because that 35mm is such a key piece of my kit, I'm waiting until they come out with a 35mm to switch over all of my lenses to the RF series, or at least a few of them over to the RF series. And so for now, I'm using EF lenses on the mount adapter for the R3 and the R6. If you're interested in kind of checking out my full kit, I will leave a link down below in the description that kind of walks you through all of the gear that I use for the bigger jobs and bigger destination work that I have. And so feel free to check out the entire kit if you'd like to do that. But for international work and smaller elopements like this one, I usually strip my kit back even farther and just bring with me 2 bodies and 3 lenses. The 2 bodies are the Canon EOS R3 and the Canon EOS R6. And then the 3 lenses that I bring with me are the 2 primary lenses I use, the 35 and the 85mm 1.4 lenses. And then I also bring like a backup lens, which is my 24-70 f2.8 lens. So I want to chat about why I ended up renting the 28-70. So for the Scotland elopement, this is kind of a multi-day elopement that was happening over the course of about 4 to 5 days. I knew I was going to be traveling quite a bit, both on planes and buses and just like hiking around and walking around. And I really wanted a versatile lens that would be able to handle a variety of situations, but also still look incredible. I didn't want to just carry a 35mm around with me. I didn't want to have to carry 2 bodies with 2 lenses. I really didn't want to have to swap lenses back and forth, but I also knew that I really didn't want to use my 24-70 lens because it's a 2.8 lens. I just knew the aperture didn't open wide enough to give me the depth of field that I wanted. And honestly, I had been hearing really good things about the 28-70 f2 lens. And so it was a perfect situation to kind of rent a lens, try it out in an incredible location, an incredible environment for like 4 or 5 days where I knew I was going to be shooting a ton of work, really put the lens through its paces and just kind of see if this lens lived up to the expectations that I really had of it, to see how well it would fit into my kit if I was to use this lens on a more permanent basis. And let me tell you, this lens did not disappoint. This lens absolutely blew my mind. So a few things about this lens. So number one, it is a massively heavy and massively thick lens. This lens is definitely not just a one-to-one replacement for the 24-70 2.8. It's a lot thicker, a lot larger, a lot heavier, and it's just a bigger lens in general. So I honestly had to create some more space in my bag. I just tried to put it into the slot that I had the 24-70 in. It would not fit, so I had to kind of rearrange the bag and make room for this lens because it's a very big lens. If you're trying to buy a travel lens for like incognito on the street work, this is not a lens for you. This is a very big lens, so it's not terrible. Like, it's not going to break your back to carry this thing around, but just be aware when you purchase this lens or when you rent this lens, it's not just like slapping on a quick prime and having a nice light lens to carry around. This lens is beefy and it's going to weigh a bit on your camera. But it absolutely makes up for itself because the focal length and the aperture is incredible. I was so impressed with this lens. So the first couple of days, I flew from the US to Scotland on a Friday, arrived on a Saturday, and Saturday and Sunday were all just like explore and travel days. Spent a day kind of like touring around the city of Edinburgh, did a bunch of kind of like fun landscapey city work, shot some fun portraits of my wife, and then Sunday was like a full travel day on a bus where we were in transit from Edinburgh to St. Andrews and then St. Andrews to Glencoe, stopped on the beach for a while, toured around the city of St. Andrews, and again, just took a bunch of like fun landscape stuff, a bunch of video clips, a bunch of portraits of my wife, and all of this was done on the 28-70. I didn't take out my 35 or my 85 one time. And so the 28 versus like a normal 35 for me allowed me to kind of step back and pull back a little bit more, get a little bit more of a landscape vibe while still obviously covering that 35mm spectrum, and then punch all the way into 70. And having an f2.0 kind of constant aperture throughout the lens was phenomenal. I didn't ever find myself needing to go wider than that from an aperture standpoint. So for like a travel and like a kind of run and gun, kind of candid documentary style lens, this lens was perfection. and it's stupid sharp as well. I don't know if it's just because this was my first time really trying out an RF lens on a Canon mirrorless system without using the EF to RF mount adapter, but the lens was super sharp. Even my wife commented on like how sharp the photos looked. I'm super impressed with this lens, with the quality. The focus was fast and accurate, but was really impressed with how well this worked from both a photo and a video angle. Cannot really complain at all about the versatility of this lens for travel, for docu-style kind of candid work. And so then we got to the wedding day itself, and I was like, honestly, I think I'm gonna leave the 28-70 on my R3 and then pair it with the 85 on my R6. So I kind of had a dual camera setup with two different lenses, because the one thing I will say about the 28-70 is I wish it would zoom in a little bit more. Now granted, if someone made like a 28-85 f2.0, the lens would be massive. So I don't want that lens actually, because I don't want to have to carry it around. But that was the one thing I did kind of find I was lacking, was the ability, especially on a wedding day, to zoom in or to punch in a little bit more on the telephoto end of things and just really get that compression. And so pairing the 28-70 f2 with an 85 f1.4 was a really nice combination for the wedding day. I didn't have to switch lenses off back and forth, just could have two lenses on my person at all times, and it really worked beautifully for the wedding day. And I will say, I really did put this lens through its paces, because it was Scotland in the Highlands in the mountains in October, and it poured. It was super rainy, super windy, and the 28-70 stood up to all of it. I definitely had to wipe it down a few times because it was just dripping water off this thing, but the weather sealing held. The lens was still sharp and accurate and focused well, performed in both a photo and a video environment, and I was pushing this thing hard. I shot thousands and thousands of images just for the elopement, as well as hundreds of video clips, and it did a phenomenal job. So super impressed with it. The only time I really had to switch it off for a prime was when we started shooting photos indoors at night with no artificial lighting, and the f2.0 would not give me enough light. So I ended up switching off to the 35 and the 85 like I normally would have for kind of an indoor reception at night. But again, that's a very specific use case where you would expect a prime to excel a lot more than a zoom lens anyway. So yeah, overall, I cannot say really anything bad about this lens. It's definitely a heavy lens, but once you kind of get over that, and especially if you're shooting with a little bit beefier of a camera body in general, like I am on the R3, it's a perfect lens. So the question you're gonna ask is like, Josh, are you gonna buy this lens, or have you bought this lens? I have not bought this lens because it is stupid expensive.
No!
My plan is to ultimately sell my 24-70 f2.8 and probably one of my other lenses like the 100 macro as well, a lens that I just don't use a lot anymore, and to replace that with the 28-70 f2 lens. And so my kit would be the 35, the 85, and the 28-70, which I think would be a beautiful kit for me, for elopements, for weddings, for candid run and gun. That'd be kind of an all-inclusive kit where I could just carry two bodies, three lenses everywhere I go and be done. Now, do I think this 28-70 lens is a prime replacement? Clearly no, because I'm still talking about my 35 and the 85. But I think the major thing for me is, up until now, I've carried around the 35 and the 85 and actually used those lenses. And then the 24-70 f2.8 has been in my bag. I haven't really used that for more than a few shots. With the 28-70 f2, because of how sharp it is and because the aperture actually opens to f2 and it feels more like a prime lens, I absolutely would pull that out of my bag. It would get a lot of use on a wedding day, paired with either a 35 or an 85 on the other camera, would be a beautiful setup for my line of work. So rather than just having two lenses that I use in kind of a backup in the bag, I would actually have three that I'm cycling between, and would actually get consistent use throughout the elopement or throughout the wedding day. So honestly, I think it's a beautiful lens. It's a perfect lens for my setup, and once I'm able to afford it, I absolutely will be purchasing it. So hopefully that's been kind of a helpful look at that lens. I know it wasn't like a super in-depth technical review. This lens has been out for a couple of years, so there's plenty of technical reviews out there, but I just wanted to give like a practical, in the field, like I used this for 4 or 5 days in a row, shot thousands of clips on it, very practical review, which is my style anyway. So hopefully it's been helpful. If you have any specific questions about how I used it, how it performed in certain situations, anything like that, feel free to drop those in the comments or DM me on Instagram. I'd be happy to answer those questions and have a conversation. All right, thanks so much. I'll see you in the next video.